Hi, everybody. I'm sure you all have brought that energy into this room and that we can send that to Thomas for the next presentation. Um, it's such a big privilege and pleasure for me to introduce Thomas today. He's our new colleague at Northwest University. We're very proud of all his accomplishments and him being here today. Thomas was in Zurich for the last 5 years, where he was in the ensemble as a soloist. And today he's going to be exploring emotion regulation strategies that could mitigate music performance anxiety through action research. Thomas, we look forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as clearly stated, this is what I will be doing. Having a look at how we can mitigate or even remedy music performance anxiety through emotion regulation. So to talk about this, I just want to quickly show you all what we're going to be talking about. I'll give you some context to my study. But before I begin, I would like to just say to the side that this is an ongoing process. So what I'm sharing with you today is not any findings. There won't be any conclusions. This is simply what I am busy with at the moment with my own studies, and that it is rather exciting, and I'm passionate about this, and hence me sharing this with you today. So today, I'll give you some context. It's a little bit of my own story, my own experiences while being a soloist in Zurich. We'll talk about music performance anxiety and what that is, what it looks like. We'll talk about the impact of the symptoms of music performance anxiety on, well, in this case, opera or song singers. And this is prior to, during, and sometimes even after performances. And then I'll just talk a little bit about what emotion regulation is and what some of the theories are. And I'll just briefly go over what technical action research is, the method that I will be using to do my research. And then very shortly, my hypothesis. So in this case, I am the participant researcher. So I am doing research on myself through my own experiences. But we'll get to that in a minute. Right, so context. It was roughly September 2021. We've all just gone through one hell of a time with COVID. And I was at the Opera House warming up for a performance of the crowning of Popea. And while being in the dressing room, usually very early as I am, when going to the theater, I had a very sharp pain in my chest. I fainted. I woke up with heart palpitations, dizziness, couldn't really breathe properly, couldn't see properly, and I thought I was having a heart attack. Luckily, it was not, but I will get to that. So just across from the opera, there's a doctor's office, and I got myself there, and in a great panic, I asked them to help me. What's happening? I told them I think I'm having a heart attack. So they put me on all sorts of machines and draw some blood and all this jazz. And in the end, the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with your heart. You're not having a heart attack, thank goodness. But come back tomorrow so we can do some more testing. So I did that. And after concluding all of that, the doctor said to me, Mr. Erlank, please go see a psychiatrist. Because what I had experienced was some sort of manifestation of anxiety, and in this case, music performance anxiety. So that is the rough context of the study and why an interest in all of this started. So unfortunately, after this first incident, I started having panic attacks regularly, so much so that I was completely debilitated, there we go, and had to spend some time in hospital. So when you reach a point where your anxiety levels are so high that you cannot function, forget about stepping on a stage, I'll tell you that. It's horrible. But we'll get to some of the symptoms of music performance anxiety or just anxiety. And I'll tell you a little bit about where it started for me even prior to this, right in this very building many years ago when I studied here. So I went for prolonged therapy, cognitive-behavioural therapy. which was wonderful also because I am an individual not keen to have pharmaceutical intervention when I am in need of medical help. So this is, of course, not always possible, but in my case it was, and I managed to find a wonderful therapist to help me through the process of recovery. That did not mean that the panic attacks completely stopped. However, I learned how to manage them better, hence the study, and specifically emotion regulation theories, which is very interesting, but we'll get to all of that. So, of course, as with anything anxiety related, it can happen from nothing, or it can happen from a stressor, or something that happened yesterday and only manifests today. There's no real sort of set timeline that you can expect, oh, this happened now, so now I'm going to have a panic attack, and then I'm going to recover, and then we're going to repeat the process. No. So for a long time, after September 2021, I managed it very well. Until end of last year, when I decided that I'm going to quit my job at the Opera House in Zurich, before I knew that I would come to South Africa, and people would ask me questions about the future. And are you sure? Is this not a stupid move to make? And all of a sudden, whoo, back came all the panic attacks. Wonderful. So I had to apply what I've learned previously to help myself manage all of that better. So if we move on, let's quickly have a look at what music performance anxiety is according to some of these very clever people. Music performance anxiety is a prevalent occurrence in the performing arts, as I'm sure all of us know. It possesses the capability to derail a performance completely if the involved party is experiencing one or more of the extreme symptoms, such as a panic attack. Music performance anxiety has been defined as the persistent experience of anxious apprehension related to music performance, caused by a variety of factors including genetics, environmental stimuli, and the individual's experience, emotions, cognitions, and behaviors. Just by a show of hand, if I may, how many of you have experienced this kind of thing in your life? On stage, off stage, in a classroom, practically everyone. Hence the study. A lot has been written about anxiety, about performance anxiety, especially if you look in the field of sports. It's incredible. Sportsmen like, I don't know, Tiger Woods or back in the day with Michael Schumacher, they all had mental trainers or psychologists helping them through the processes that they had to these high stress environments. And how are we different as performers or teachers? Because the teaching is basically also performing, isn't it? So that on music performance anxiety. Then, let's have a look. The impact of music performance anxiety on opera song singers prior to or during performances. And to understand that, we first have to quickly look at what a healthy singing technique looks like. And we're all either singers, students, or teachers, or performers of some sort, so we have our own ideas about this. But what I did is I took the words of Janis Chapman, but I'll get to that. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. So just a list of symptoms of music performance anxiety as per Sina and Arlington. A rapid heartbeat, heart palpitations, muscular tension, sweaty palms, dizziness, nausea, trembling, shortness of breath, chills or heat sensation, derealization, so a feeling of unreality, which is perhaps easily said when you say you have a feeling of disconnect with your environment, or depersonalization, where you have a feeling of being disconnected with your thoughts, your feelings, and your body. Fear of losing control. I'm sure we all have that sometimes. And then, of course, very extreme, the fear of dying while being on stage. That's a reality, unfortunately, for a lot of people. So, the effects thereof on singing. If I remember correctly. Right, so Janis Chapman, very famous teacher, and she has some wonderful books to read. She names the 3 core components of a healthy singing technique: primal sound, postural alignment, breathing, and support. Now, I'm just going to very briefly talk about this from my own perspective. So this is not research that I've done, including anyone else, or a lot of reading, but from my own experience with anxiety. When we talk about postural alignment or breathing and support, now imagine, if you look at just a few of these symptoms as mentioned by Sina and Arlington: shortness of breath, trembling, feeling a bit dizzy or dizziness, or perhaps having a rapid heartbeat. From my own experience, to reach a state of calm or controlled breathing, and then the ability to support that breath, is almost impossible on an optimal level when the autonomic nervous system takes hold. This is, of course, in the context of a fight or flight response to some stressor or the fear that you have. So, in other words, our autonomic survival response becomes the inhibitor of our abilities to do what we have to do, unless we learn how to deal with that. Alignment, postural alignment, same thing from my own experience. And this is where I'm going to come back to this building. In the hall where we just were before the FISMA, I sang many exams. And I had very, very bad experiences of derealization and depersonalization while being in an exam setup, where it really felt like I was looking at myself from above, from the side, completely strange. Who took the best drugs in the world? I'm on a level. And that's really what it feels like. And I'm sure some of you have had experiences like this. And now imagine you've been told, to have a good posture, stand upright, focus on this, focus on what's happening inside here with the sound, the production, all of that, but you're not even in your own body. It's impossible. And I say that from my own experience, not quoting anyone here. So, as I mentioned earlier, I was looking for ways to deal with this in a non-pharmaceutical way. So, of course, there are medications to be taken if, in very extreme cases, beta blockers or all sorts of things that can help. And I'm not frowning upon that. It is just a personal choice of mine to try and remedy my problems without these. So, if we go on, emotion regulation theory, nothing new, but it's rather interesting. ER refers to the attempt to influence one's emotions, defined as time-limited, situationally bound, and valanced positive or negative states. This is according to McRae and Gross. Similarly stated, ER is a multidimensional construct that broadly refers to a heterogeneous set of actions designed to modulate which emotions we have, when we have them, and how we experience and express them. And this is according to Sisler and Olantunji. Seneca and Winter name this type of response to distress coping and identify that there are 4 different strategic types. So this is cognitive, behavioral, and cognitive behavioral, and then self-help and others. Osborne et al. State that the most effective clinical treatment for music performance anxiety is a combination of cognitive and behavioral techniques, including cognitive restructuring, attention control, and behavioral rehearsal, relaxation, and mental skills training. Right. So I think if I head on, we have this wonderful diagram provided by Larson, which gives a very clear, I don't know, the print might be a bit small, so I will be reading. Apologies. Behavioral strategies is about things to do, either in the moment or in the situation or with the mood itself or the emotion itself, or cognitive strategies, ways to think about the situation or ways to think about the emotion or mood itself. So examples up here would be things to do, focusing on the situation, to problem-directed action, make resolutions, plans for the future, talking to a friend or a mentor, trying harder, because that works, withdrawal, avoidance, or running away. These are all very natural. Yeah. Or then things to do when you're focusing on the mood itself is to stay busy, keep distracted. We all do that, I'm sure. Helping others, serving so you don't pay attention to yourself or the sensation that you're having, the emotions. Self-reward, seeking pleasure, socializing, express the emotion, venting. Ooh, we love that, you know? Inhibit the expression, suppress it. To do exercise, which is a very good thing, by the way. And ingesting, for instance, caffeine, carbohydrates, tranquilizers, alcohol, other natural substances, for example, melatonin. So this is all behavioral strategies to take on in case of. Cognitive strategies, ways to think about a situation, for instance, would be to do cognitive reframing. To reinterpret a situation so that it's not so bad. This is exactly what Nancy was talking about earlier. Thinking of success or other areas of life, something must be going well. Yeah, you know. I got out of bed this morning, hurrah, yeah. Downward social comparison. Someone else is always worse off. No? Praying, put faith in God, other people, some institution, and that's fair. We all have our own things, spirituality and so forth. Or fatalism, my goodness. What will be, will be. Being content with situations is like giving up, I suppose, somehow. And then when you focus on the emotion or the mood itself, with ways to think, meditation, wonderful. Stoicism, strength and adversity. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. I do believe that, though. Fantasy, daydreaming to forget troubled feelings. So this is a wonderful way to project into the future your positive intentions. But it's not a way to try and forget what needs to be done or what needs to be dealt with. Active forgetting. Refusing to think about how you're feeling. And then intellectualizing whatever it is that you are experiencing. So treat the mood in an abstract as a piece of information. And this is sometimes very helpful to distance yourself from a situation or an emotion and to just look at it exactly what Nancy said earlier, where you evaluate what you're experiencing to create a new perception thereof. Okay. So if we go back to what Osborne stated, here are the three categories, more or less. Cognitive strategies. So cognitive strategies, more so than what was in this diagram, one is stress inoculation training. Sounds a bit intense, I know. Kashani in 2015 states that stress inoculation is a psychological exercise to inoculate or prepare an individual to become resistant to the effect of stresses, similar in a way in which vaccinations would make you resistant against particular illnesses. This is not a particularly pleasant treatment. Positive self-talk. Hardy et al. State that self-talk is a cognitive technique that is used by athletes, or in our case, performers, if you like, as the result of or as a means of influencing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors positively. So that is something that is very practical for each and every one of us to apply on the daily. If you can be mindful enough to realize when you're talking to yourself in a certain way about a certain situation or a certain emotion, to pinpoint that and say, stop, what am I experiencing, and how can I turn the story around so I can learn something from this, or just not be so hard on yourself. That is not so easy. Okay, behavioral strategies. So here we have systematic desensitization. So this term was actually coined by a South African in the 1950s, a man called Joseph Wolpe, who did a study on cats, right? Anyway, it's still applicable to us nowadays. Sturmy in 2008 states that systematic desensitization is, or graded exposure, is a behavioral intervention commonly used in the treatment of phobias and other anxiety-related disorders. The aim of systematic desensitization is to overcome the avoidance of stresses by gradually exposing individuals to the phobic stimulus until their anxiety to the fear is extinguished. It's like, I remember when I was a small boy, I loved water, absolutely loved water, and always wanted to swim in a pool. As soon as we got to the ocean, I wouldn't dare, because I couldn't see the bottom, the bottom of it. So I would walk in a little bit, put my toe in the water and walk away until I do it a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more. And before I knew it, I was jumping off rocks into the ocean. And this is basically the principle, where you break the fear down until it's not stopping you to do what you want to do anymore. Progressive muscle relaxation. Farsi et al. State that progressive muscle relaxation is an exercise that reduces stress and anxiety in your body by having you slowly tense and then relax each muscle. The theory behind this exercise, is that you cannot have the feeling of relaxation and warm well-being in your body and at the same time experience anxiety symptoms. With practice, you become more aware, so here comes mindfulness again, of when you are experiencing tension, and you will have the skills to help you relax. That is very, very helpful. Counter-conditioning. Keller, Hennings, and Dunsmore in 2020 state that counter-conditioning refers both to the technique and reputed process by which behavior is modified through a new association with a stimulus of an opposite valence. It is considered a form of inhibition that interferes with the expression of the originally learned response without erasing it. So it would be, let's go to my childhood again, why not? Broccoli. I could not. I had a fear of eating broccoli. It was tingly and weird. I just couldn't. So my mother told me stories about how the little fairies who lived in the tiny forests on the broccoli would leave their home especially so that I could have food to eat. So being afraid of these little thingies on broccoli initially turned into, oh, I might still be a little bit scared of this, but at least they offered up their home for me so I could have food. And I started eating it, and now I love it. The original fear did not just go away, but you learn to react differently to the reaction of the stressor, or the stressor itself, of course. Self-help strategies, I think we are all familiar with the whole array of meditation practices that exist, things like breathing exercises and physical exercise, but especially things like yoga or Pilates if you want to concentrate on relaxing your body while strengthening yourself. As singers and as teachers of singers here, we are all very well familiar with deep diaphragmatic breathing and the positive effects thereof on us as individuals and how it brings calm when necessary. So these are basically the three categories, the three different types of emotion regulation strategies that I will be applying in my study. And I'm coming to the technique of research that I will be doing and how this will work, because it's a lot, and seeing that I am the only person taking part in my own research, there must be method to the madness, right? So the choice was made that I will be doing technical action research. What this means is that I get to implement generated knowledge into the process of research every time in a cycle, and we'll get to that in a minute. Technical action research, or action research, is a collaborative approach to research, that provides people with the means to take systematic action in an effort to resolve specific problems. In my study, the problem is how to mitigate the effects of MPA through means of ER. It is a flexible methodology allowing for change during the process of research through means of overlapping cycles of investigation and incorporating generated knowledge at all stages. Berg and Howard, 2017, state that in its basic form, the AR procedural routine involves 4 stages. Now, I have a figure here provided by Given 2008, which really explains the action research cycle very well. Start by investigating the current situation in partnership and planning and change. Second, introducing the change, trying out new practices with the aim to improve it, of course. That is the aim of the game. Monitoring the impact of change and collecting a wide array of data. Analyzing and interpreting the data to generate actionable knowledge. And then we're back at number 2 by introducing change again. And this cycle is repeated as often as necessary during the process of research until you come to a point where you're happy to report on your findings. So this could be very short or terribly long. That very much depends on you and the research. Yeah. So basically, my hypothesis here is that you can mitigate music performance anxiety through means of emotion regulation theories if applied. So there's nothing much more about that to be said right now until I'm done with my paper, and I'll be sharing that with each and all of you, if you like. And I thank you for your attention.
Thomas, thank you so much for sharing that with us and also being so vulnerable with your stories. I think that's definitely been a theme for today. Shall we take a couple of questions? Yes, Diana. Sorry, let me get you.
This is all really valuable, and I'm, with all the hands that went up, I've certainly experienced performance anxiety as a younger singer. In some of your research, even though this isn't your direction you're going, did you find preventive? You're mainly talking about coping strategies. Did you find any research on preventive? How we stave this off at a young age so that students don't fall into these patterns?
That's a very tricky thing because that very much depends on the context of education a child goes through, family context, your social circles, your day-to-day social interactions. But preventiveness, I think, comes in practicing mindfulness. This is something that comes up quite often in all of this. It's where you practice mindfulness, and when you as a parent or as a teacher or as a mentor of sorts can teach younger people to become mindful, not just of their own, but of the emotions of others. Be aware of the effects of the things we say, we do. And this comes back again to what Nancy also said earlier about, or that you said about trauma. It can really be something that happens in passing with one word. It could be something that was meant to be a positive comment, but was received in a way that was perhaps not so good. So preventative action for performance anxiety is very hard, I think, because it's not a singular thing. It is absolutely a structure that is being built from the day that you're born to the day that it first manifests, and it might or it might not. And the best we can do as individuals is to be compassionate and to be mindful and to listen to the youngest, listening from to the youngest of us to the oldest of us, and to try and learn and be open-minded and really be careful with what we say Criticism needs to be made. We need to say things, but how do we say that? As a teacher for a young kid, how do you treat that child? Or a mother, or a father, or a brother, or a sister, or a guardian of sorts. It is on us as those with a bit of experience in life to help the younger ones develop into individuals that are not prone to having anxiety. But unfortunately, we live in a world where industry thrives on anxiety and stress. So it's very, very hard to do that. But this is a whole different study. But I think this is this is the answer, that it's on us to try our very best to just be kind and be mindful and be wary of what we say and how we do that in our context as teachers. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Thomas. I think when it boils down to it, it's all about promoting empathy.
Yes.
Something that we've lost.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi, Jason.
Hi. I'm not gonna lie, I'm very excited to read this paper of yours because I personally also struggle with performance anxiety, but my struggle comes after the performance. So because of like trauma, yeah, and especially if there's a recording of like a performance or of my exam, I will listen to it probably like 15, 20 times and I think, oh, this was tight. The eval wasn't right. The nasality came back. Oh, I didn't say the double T. Oh, and so like I would get, I get anxious and I'm thinking to myself, this was probably a very bad performance. And then I get compliments while I look at my exam mark and I'm thinking, something is not right here because I don't feel like that is something that I deserve, for example. So so I'm just very excited to see through your experience how I can help myself.
I think something that is very current at the moment, recently, Lisette Oropeza made a social media post about imposter syndrome. I don't know who of you actually saw all of that. We are our own worst critics. And this is truth, truth, truth. And I can relate to what you're saying because I suppose as a performer myself, you want to give your best and your perception of yourself. And then we come back to the story of Nancy, where it is the stories that we believe about ourselves and how we go about with that. And you have to work, from my experience and what I've done in the past, and I still do this, is to do cognitive restructuring. Think about what you're saying to yourself, asking yourself why you're doing that, and to try and restructure the thoughts. It is okay to give yourself a tap on the shoulder every now and then to say, today I'm not going to criticize myself, rather just say, well done for getting through this. Maybe tomorrow you can say, well done for getting through this, and well done, you did maybe, beautiful legato line here and there. Don't say much. Maybe the day after that, you can add another, and another, and another. This is one way. There are many ways. But it comes back to kindness towards yourself and having empathy towards yourself. Because we give our everything when we're on stage. We pour out our souls. I mean, just being upstairs now there, listening to the choir, I mean, it's hard not to have tears in your eyes in some of these moments. Because the vulnerability that comes with performing opens us up completely to being hurt. And you should be the last one to hurt yourself. Yeah.
That criticism that we experience when we perform, and especially if it's something that is post-performance, is also something that extends to other aspects of our lives.
Yes.
How many times do we not have conversations with friends, and then we think afterwards, why did I say that? That was so stupid. And so I think it's also part of something, a greater issue that we have to find resolution within ourselves. Okay.
My question is on emotional dysregulation. If you have been diagnosed with that issue, most people that have ADHD go together with emotional dysregulation, and they find it difficult to regulate their emotions. What is the solution to that using your method?
There isn't one specific way to fix any of these problems. My advice would be to find a therapist of sorts and start with cognitive behavioral therapy. Walk through the problem until you come to a point where you can take action, and that will be helped through a therapist or a counselor of sorts. I cannot tell you what the answer specifically is because it's a very individual process. I might have a certain problem, you might have the same problem, but our solutions will be different, and it's for you to work that out with a therapist or a counselor or someone that is professionally trained to deal with that. Yeah, I think that is the best. Of course, there is self-help methods. Coming back to mindfulness, coming back to relaxation exercises, coming back to when you're feeling anxious or you have elevated stress levels, to do things like grounding exercises. Smell one thing, see one thing, feel one thing. Concentrate on the minimum in that moment while breathing calmly. There are methods, but these things are very unique to you as an individual. And that's why it is important to work with someone that is professional that can do that, yeah.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, my name is Sasha. I'm a student here at Stellenbosch with Mrs. Dassapper. I just wanted to ask, do you think that this continuous research would be applicable to, I don't know if my question is along the lines of Jason's and Zanani's, but this feeling after a preparation for a performance, having your performances, and then afterwards feeling like, oh, what now? Or there's this emptiness, actually. It's not necessarily criticizing yourself for your performance, but it's like just empty. I don't know if would your research be able to, yeah.
May I ask, is this something where you feel that you've depleted yourself emotionally? So by performing that you feel that you've emptied your tank, so to speak?
Perhaps, could be. Or I don't know if it would be something underlying or, yeah.
That's an interesting thing to think about, I think, and to give you a proper answer for that, I would have to go do some research, because I don't know. Again, I think these things are so unique to ourselves, and to understand this kind of thing, I would have to go do some reading, so I'd rather not give an answer to that, yeah.
Sorry, Rochelle had a response to that. I think she was talking about the impact of adrenaline as well, which is something to take into account.
Talking about projection tomorrow. Yeah, I think I work with a lot of professional singers, and almost all singers feel that, even if they feel high after the performance, when their parents or their friends go and they're alone. Most singers feel that post-performance blues. I think they embrace it eventually because it's what makes you get back on stage, because you love that high. I think most singers I know feel like that. I have a question also for Thomas. I'm South African, so I'm a sports fan. I don't think, it doesn't exist. And I'm a huge fan of sports psychology. And the Bible in my studio is, golf is not a game of perfect. Buy it, your life will never be the same. And it's written by a guy called Bob Rotella. And he talks a lot about practicing to trust your technique.
Mm-hmm.
And my question, as I say, I work mostly with professional singers, and the word imposter syndrome, I think, is very complicated for singers, because sometimes there are parts of singers' technique that is, in fact, imposturing. And I think, I wonder what your feeling is about that, because I always think that when one does these studies about how people feel when they perform, what's happening in their lives, all of those things, there is this other underlying thing about how much do I trust myself and what I can do. And I think that is what somebody like Rotella does really well, because he allows you to want to be perfect and then say, but it's not a game of perfect. But you can only accept that if you have trusted your technique, and to trust your technique, you have to understand what that is.
Right.
So I wonder how that kind of part fits into this kind of study.
Yes. So this is very interesting because, again, this applies to me as well. When we talk about sort of this quasi-imposter parts of our voices and so forth. And then in the last 6-7 years, working where I worked, I often had horrible experiences where I would sing repertoire knowing for a fact that it is not for me. Knowing for a fact that my technical ability cannot really give the product that is required. However, I had no choice. So there's that as well. So if you have the mindfulness to realize that you have shortcomings, let's say shortcomings, then you can actively think about that and change your way of thinking about it. And that's what I did over the years. Realizing that there are certain things that I can do very well, focus on that. In my context of an ensemble singer, you were shoved into productions and you just had to do what they gave you to do. You have a contractual obligation. And if you call them and say, I don't think this is something that I can do or that is suited to my voice, and say, well, you signed a contract, too bad. You have to do it. Not like that everywhere. I'm not saying that that is the norm, but it happens. So you have a sense, certain people have a sense of anxiety regarding what they can and cannot do. And this is sometimes knowingly or not knowingly something to do with a technique or a shortcoming or not. So I think it absolutely has something to do with that. How I will apply it in my own study, I'm not entirely sure. But it is definitely food for thought for me as well. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Nancy.
Yeah. Still have a few minutes, so it's good.
Nancy, and if there's one more question, then we can have the last one.
Yeah, no.
My name is Nancy Boss.
Hi, Nancy.
Thank you so much. This is brilliant. And thank you for this conference, doing this. I don't know, Diana, have you ever seen a mindset segment like this before? I mean, this is cutting edge, people. You guys, this isn't done. And the vulnerability, thank you so much. And you and Diana, who is a peak performance coach certified, and perhaps other people in this room would be qualified to sit and have one heck of a panel. I have a question about your strategy slide. Some of those strategies seem to be in the moment coping strategies. This is the problem now and I need to solve it now. And some of them seem to be deep dives that could take months and years.
Yes.
Is that, do results work better? The studies that you were citing, did they show different results?
So as far as I know, that in my life with the therapy that I've gone through to help me with my anxiety, let's step away from the performance anxiety for a moment and go with anxiety. We tried different things. And when we started, it was basic cognitive-behavioural therapy. So I sat with a therapist, we spoke, so basically venting and sharing with a mentor, as mentioned there. And it was a quick fix to a long problem. However, it wasn't long-lasting. So in the process, I could do that on the weekly, and my anxiety levels would be down. But I still had to learn certain of these other skills or strategies to learn to deal with the in-moment situation. So they definitely have different proficiency levels, or not proficiency, how do you say, effectiveness, yeah. And that also, again, comes back to the individual. So for me, maybe, or for you perhaps, just learning how to do a very relaxing breathing exercise along with practicing mindfulness on the daily or before performing might be enough to curb the effect or the onset of high levels of anxiety. But for someone else, it means perhaps that you have to deal with weekly, bi-weekly sessions with a therapist, including doing certain meditation things, including doing counter-conditioning, for example, over a long period. This is specific to you as an individual, but yes, they are very different, and yes, they take different lengths of time to reach the point of satisfaction, if you like. When you're happy with where you are and you feel safe to take the world on your own, so to speak. But this is this is what makes this kind of study so incredibly interesting, is the fact that we are so individual in our ways that we respond to stresses, to anxiety, to all sorts of problems like this. Yeah.
Maybe one last question.
Hi, my name is Andile Kumalo, and thank you so much, Thomas, for your presentation, because I think it cuts across the board, like different spaces, not just performance, even teaching, actually, standing in front of people. But I know that you are focusing more on individual, which is true. But I also feel that actually it's a social. Uh, it has to do a lot more with social, and on the first place, we live in a country which is hugely violent and with daily kind of sort of traumas that people have to live through. Like like if you think about the harassment that women actually go through every day in public transport, you have to go all of that. You still have to find ways of managing that in a society that is hugely divided in terms of resources. No one actually, like a lot of people cannot afford to go to a therapist. So, if we think of that as an embedded social problem that is structural, I wonder if expanding your study in such a way that is it possible that such things could be offered as part of the curriculum. So on a broader spaces, I'm like, if you spoke about the high performing athletes.
Yep.
In England, every soccer team has their own sort of psychologist working constantly every day on each player, so that they are actually performing at a very high level, and they're already very good, but those doubts are always there. So for young artists, where you know that they will face this, irrespective of how well actually they are, in what ways can we then create like I think it was Diana earlier talking about preventive structures. So as opposed to reacting, how can we sort of formalize into the education structure so that actually when the students also particularly when they finish, they're also equipped to deal with these anxieties that as a professional you face?
I think that this is a topic for a massive study, alongside sociologists, psychologists, educational professionals. That's a word. Working with institutes, universities from different areas to get a fair demographic. I think that is something that is possible to do, and I think that is something that is not just possible, but perhaps even very necessary. How I can apply that right now, I am not entirely sure, to be honest. That is a mammoth task to take on, and also to bring on board the Department of Education and Higher Education for something like this. But it is definitely something that I would consider for the future, because it is something that I am very passionate about, and something to consider. Thank you.
Thomas, thank you so much. You've elicited so much to everybody.
Thank you.